Hello and a very warm welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Humor. This is our 13th episode in our COVID series, and I always thank you very much for joining us. As always, big shout out to any first-time listeners. Welcome aboard the IoT train. Over the past few years, I've seen an influx of people who have shown interest in the world of IoT. Some of them are looking at it as a possible career choice. Maybe they're just out of school or they just don't like what they're doing for a living. Others are looking to make investments in the next big thing, and others still are trying to learn more about a technology that they fear will lead to the loss of their job in the future. I guess people seem to think I might have some answers, as I get a lot of questions from different people. Some of them are through the podcast and blog, others are from friends and acquaintances, while still others come from questions I see posted on forums. I decided to tackle some of these questions as a way to give people more information. Whether they're using IoT as a way to push their career forward, make money investing, or just to give themselves a bit of comfort. Because there were a large number of questions, I'm breaking it up into two segments. The first segment, which is this episode, ironically, will focus on the current state of the world of IoT and the last few years, I guess. We will focus on what areas have over and underperformed compared to expectations to date. Look at whether IoT will be soon dominated by big tech companies, and a prediction as to how 5G will affect the landline numbers. We'll start by talking about how IoT has grown the last few years. The first question goes as follows. Has the growth of IoT been as fast as you thought it would be? If not, why not? There's a very common joke among the old-timers in the space of IoT as to how one of these years we will finally see that hockey stick curve level of growth in IoT that's always been predicted. Now, don't get me wrong, IoT has been a very fast-growing space in the past decade, but we never got quite to that level that we always thought we would. I guess the main reasons have to do with limitations, unfortunately mainly ones that we put on ourselves. The lack of standardization has hurt us. I've used this analogy before, but imagine if your HP printer, which you love, wouldn't work with your Dell computer, and neither one of them talked to that Microsoft operating system. You'd be locked into a single vendor, and companies absolutely hate that. I know Apple does that, and people hate them for it. So that's been a big problem in the area of IoT. The other issue has to do with how many of the people in the sales side approached it. IoT changes companies. There's no way around that. But we've done a horrible job in general at educating our customers on the aspects of how it makes changes to your company. We haven't done a good job in putting together return on investment projections, and if we have, they've often seemed so artificially inflated that companies have said, yeah, right, that can't be the truth. I know we could overcome these issues, and we've actually started to overcome them, but it does explain some of the issues preventing us from seeing the growth potential that we should have seen. Specifically on a few areas, I think some areas took on IoT about as I expected they would. Oil and gas, public safety, and utilities have been doing things with private radio for decades before what we consider IoT had come to market. So moving over to cellular-based IP networks wasn't that big of a deal for them. Others, though, didn't move quite as expected. One example is the medical space, which I'm going to cover more in the second question. The second question, question number 2, is kind of related, but it gets more specific into certain markets. And the question is, what are some markets where IoT has shown growth that is lower than you would have thought? And what are some areas that have picked it up much faster than you ever would have imagined? I touched on the medical space as an area of underperformance. Yeah, there's always apprehension in an area of trying new things as important as this. Kind of makes sense. People's lives are on the line here. But they seem to have missed a lot of opportunity very early on. The nature of how IoT can gather information always seemed to me to be perfect for medical applications. They can see things that they normally wouldn't see, and this allows them to make better decisions. The good news is that they're really moving forward on things like wearables and artificial intelligence, which we touched on. It helps them to read X-rays and stuff like that. They're working a lot with big data and other IoT-related applications. So they have started to move forward. I'm just surprised it took them this long. Another area that always shocked me a little bit for its lack of IoT initiative was the entire food space. This goes right from the farm to table. Yeah, there are some pockets of IoT use. Farms have been using automated planting systems for years. Some are also using sensors in the field, but not nearly to the extent that they should be. I guess part of the problem was the sensors didn't last as long in the field and environmental issues. Not quite sure. The same goes for the restaurant space. All we've heard about in the news in the last few weeks with the crisis is how slim the margins are for restaurants. Surprisingly, in the single digits. It makes me wonder why you'd open a business with that low a margin, but I'll leave that to you. Having said that, many of them didn't want to invest in technology that could have greatly reduced costs. Everything from utilities to food waste, this would have helped them be more competitive. I'm kind of surprised they didn't pick it up faster. But don't get me wrong, restaurants are starting to use it now. We're seeing sensor-based applications fly off the shelves for restaurants. On the positive side, on the overperformance side, the waste management area always shocked me with how fast they adopted IoT. You don't think of the garbage guys as being progressive, but very early on, companies were using different technologies to prevent unneeded pickups of both commercial, the very large bins, and public waste bins. I guess they're just more forward-thinking than we gave them credit for, so hats off to them. For the third question, we talk about the dominance of big tech in our lives. If you follow the stock market, even casually, you may have heard the term FANG, as in FANG stocks, F-A-A-N-G. This refers to the big five tech companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. I guess it's now Alphabet. You could also have it as another A, I guess. You can definitely lump Microsoft into this group. These companies have seen huge upticks in business over the past decade and are responsible for most of the return in the stock market. Since they're very powerful in other areas, the third question is on point here. Is IoT destined to be taken over by big tech? I don't want to sound on the fence here, but the answer is yes and no. In general, you're seeing large technical and service companies getting very heavily into IoT. Platform players like Amazon's AWS and Microsoft's Azure are quite formidable in the world of IoT services, but they haven't eliminated other platforms that offer more specialized offerings. You definitely see some that will work, for instance, in the restaurant space and other areas. In terms of professional services, companies like IBM and Accenture have invested heavily into data integration and management services, but in the marketplace, most of the turnkey service providers in IoT would not fall into the megacap space, and in fact, very few of them are even publicly listed at this stage. I do see big companies moving into two areas of IoT, kind of what I just touched on. They're going to want to be the building blocks for business services, and they're going to want their products used heavily by consumers, but not in a turnkey solution manner. Look at companies like Apple and Samsung. They're moving their wearables into areas like exercise and personal health, and definitely focusing on seniors' health and things like heart attacks. But I don't see them getting into full-blown medical solutions anytime soon. They just want their products and their back end or their base offering to be used as a platform for someone to offer their own solutions. So Apple doesn't want to compete with the end solution provider. They just want to have all the tools used that are theirs. The same definitely holds true for Amazon and Microsoft on the business side. Yes, both of them are dabbling into the services side of IoT, but they're mostly building block platforms. They're not really offering end-to-end, and they're usually quite happy if a solution provider just uses their storage and access platform to enable their offerings. So again, they're not so much turnkey, so there is still a lot of space. So to recap, yes, they will dominate certain areas of IoT, but there's still plenty of space for big and small companies to do some good damage. For the final question, we look at the impact of 5G on landlines. As I've stated on a few occasions, I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the world of IoT. I've been around long enough to have seen 1G out. So I definitely remember when 4G came out, also known as LTE. In Canada, it launched just before the Vancouver Olympics in 2010, and people were just blown away about how fast you could browse videos and other things that weren't necessarily useful, but killed some time for sure. In terms of IoT specifically, though, it didn't move the needle as fast as many would have thought. Perhaps the rate plans were not there to support displacing landlines on a big scale. I'm not really sure. And this leads to our final question today. Will 5G be the end of landlines in our home and business? I guess it depends on how you use the term the end, and I have that in air quotes. If you were saying it will put an end to the growth in landlines being installed in terms of capping the number of users, I think it very well might. I think it already started to happen anyways. I believe there'll be some migration to 5G, and many will cut the cord at their house. But not enough to say it will put an end to landline use in general, far from it. I will go on record as saying almost no one cuts the cord in 2020, and probably not even in 2021, and they're simply going to be using 5G on their smartphones and tablets while not at home. It's just simply because coverage is not there, and I haven't seen any rate plans that shows me the wireless guys are eager to cut landlines by offering stupid aggressive pricing. The argument in favor of 5G is going to be its flexibility and its availability. You can have a single device, or you can have a 5G power connection to enable connectivity for your home and for your business. It can work in your home, you can take it in the car, depending on what you have. If it's battery operated, you can use it at the mall, and you could probably use it at the cottage or cabin, as they say here in Western Canada. If your lifestyle is mobile, there's a compelling reason for you to go all in on 5G. But there is the point of cost. As I mentioned, I don't think the carriers are going to kill themselves to be totally cost competitive in the first offerings with landlines, and it's going to be very expensive if you're a heavy user. There's simply not enough capacity for the carriers just to open the tap wide open, at least at the start anyways, and I think the extra costs will be tough to justify for most. You also have the issue of coverage. I've talked about this too much, probably. Many areas will not see 5G coverage for at least 2 to 3 years. So don't think you're going to get that 5G speed way out in the country. I do see, though, later generations of 5G fixing some of these issues. So come 2023, maybe 2024 or so, all bets are off, and I think it will heavily start to cannibalize landlines. When we come back, we'll wrap this up. As always, I do thank you for listening, and I do hope you enjoyed this episode. Next week, we're going to focus more on IoT in the 2020s or 2020s, however you pronounce that. We're going to talk about things like IoT employment, what areas of IoT might be ripe for new businesses, and how IoT is furthering automation. Be sure to check that out. If you like IoT, and if you're listening to this, you very well might, I encourage you to check out our webpage, which has a ton of great material on IoT. It's, of course, called the Internet of Things Made Simple.com. You might want to look us up on Facebook as well, which is called the Internet of Things Made Simple. We have a ton of links to material there. You can drop me a note through there if you have an idea for a new show, or if you just want to say hi, or tell me to stop doing these things because you hate it so much. Whatever reason you want to reach out, feel free to. If I'm connected to you on LinkedIn, drop me a note through that service. And if I'm personally connected to you via old-fashioned ways, like email or text, drop me one of those. Thanks again for listening. Take care. I'm Larry Humor.